The Mongol war machine was optimized for one variable above others: velocity. On an open battlefield, light cavalry could strike with overwhelming speed. They could reposition and strike again before an enemy formation could even turn to face them. This tactical mobility was born from their geography. The Eurasian steppe is a massive, unobstructed grassland. Surviving here meant mastering constant movement, and the military doctrine that emerged treated distance as a weapon, not a barrier. But as this nomadic force expanded outward, it collided with the exact opposite of the open steppe, the agricultural megacity. These civilizations defended themselves by concentrating wealth and people behind sheer, vertical stone walls. This created a severe mechanical paradox for the invaders. Horses cannot climb vertical brick, and light arrows cannot penetrate stone. The kinetic energy that made the Mongols lethal was entirely neutralized by static friction. Other contemporary militaries solved this by surrounding a city, waiting years for the defenders to starve. The Mongols lacked permanent agricultural supply lines. A nomadic army cannot sit in one place for 2 years, feeding itself, while waiting for a target to fall. To bypass the stone, the Mongols had to stop treating the wall as a physical barrier. Instead, they approached the city as a closed thermodynamic system and engineered a way to collapse it from the inside out. When a Mongol vanguard approached a fortified target, they did not immediately assault the walls. They began by systematically burning the undefended farming villages dispersed across the surrounding countryside. This destruction was highly calculated. The cavalry intentionally left specific escape routes open, effectively herding the fleeing peasants away from the slaughter, driving them directly toward the towering gates of the primary city. A fortified settlement maintains a stable ratio between stockpiled grain and daily consumption. When the gates open to absorb thousands of unplanned refugees, then seal shut, that equilibrium is shattered. Consumption surges upward, while stored calories remain fixed. Resources available per capita drop immediately. This engineered demographic spike forces the city to rapidly consume its own survival stores. Extreme overcrowding accelerates the spread of disease, while severe caloric deficits trigger mass starvation internally. Traditional sieges relied on passive, slow attrition, waiting for a naturally occurring famine over several seasons. This method actively forces a localized famine in a fraction of the time. This internal collapse begins while the Mongol main body is still miles away, waiting for the system to poison itself before the physical assault commences. Mongol commanders wielded demographic displacement as a kinetic weapon, engineered to shatter a city's resource calculus. Outside the city, the Mongol encampment establishes itself with methodical precision, remaining perfectly positioned just beyond the maximum kinetic range of the defending archers. Here, they face a second mechanical problem. Breaking stone requires heavy timber siege engines, but physically dragging thousands of tons of wood and iron across the Asian steppe is mathematically unviable for a fast-moving cavalry. These vanguards were operating thousands of miles away from the Mongolian heartland, completely disconnected from the heavy infrastructure required to build and transport massive artillery. The solution was to treat the military structure as an open-source framework, one designed specifically to aggressively absorb foreign technological capital as it moved. During prior conquests, Mongol commanders explicitly targeted human capital. While resisting populations were often eliminated, specialized Chinese and Islamic engineers were systematically spared from execution. These captive experts were forced into the vanguard, directly integrating their advanced architectural and mechanical knowledge into the nomadic ranks. The Mongol war machine achieved a global operational range because it did not transport heavy weapons. It transported the technical capital required to build them anywhere on Earth. This approach dictated a doctrine of in situ manufacturing. Instead of relying on a distant supply chain, the army extracted raw materials, like timber and stone, directly from the target's immediate regional environment. To process these materials, the Mongols utilized immense pools of conscripted labor, forcing local captives to fell trees and carve stone precisely to the captive engineer's specifications. This schematic demonstrates the assembly of a traction trebuchet. Local timber is linked to construct a siege engine on demand. It operates on a transfer of energy. Synchronized pulling force of conscripted labor is channeled down ropes across the fulcrum and translated into kinetic energy. The bombardment was then upgraded with secondary technologies harvested from other conquered states, packing the projectiles with chemical sulfur gas, gunpowder bombs, and Greek fire. For the static defenders, the physical destruction was compounded by psychological terror. They were bombarded by deafening, highly volatile foreign technologies they had never encountered before. By extracting the enemy's own surrounding resources and combining them with the apex technologies of the known world, the Mongols constructed a perfectly optimized, bespoke siege engine for every specific target. Even after relentless bombardment, physical friction points remain. To breach the city, an attacking force still has to navigate burning moats, layered defensive traps, and the unbroken sections of the curtain wall itself. The core of the Mongol military was the mounted archer. These men were irreplaceable assets, representing decades of highly specialized equestrian and archery training. Sending these elite units into an infantry assault against fortified stone would result in massive casualties. For Mongol commanders, trading high-value cavalry for static defensive friction was mathematically unacceptable. To solve this final barrier, they implemented the Kharash, the human shield. This was a strictly calculated logistical solution to the problem of defensive friction. The Kharash was a disposable workforce comprised entirely of recently captured prisoners of war and the very peasant refugees who had not made it inside the city gates. Thousands of these captives were forced at spear point toward the walls, carrying heavy loads of earth, timber, and debris. Their explicit function was to physically smother and fill the burning defensive moats. The Mongols viewed these human lives strictly as a cheap, fungible logistical resource, deployed specifically to absorb the lethal kinetic energy of the city's defenses. Once the moats were filled, massive wooden siege towers and battering rams were slowly pushed toward the walls, again propelled exclusively by the Kharash captives. To halt this advance, the city defenders were forced to respond. They had to rain down their highly valuable, finite stores of arrows, pitch, and boiling oil from the parapets. This chart tracks the grim resource exchange taking place at the wall. The city is trading its irreplaceable, highly manufactured ammunition to kill an endlessly replaceable, unarmored civilian population. The defenders are mathematically forced to exhaust their defensive capabilities by slaughtering their own compatriots. While this bloody, chaotic exhaustion plays out at the walls, the pristine ranks of the Mongol elite cavalry wait patiently in the distant background, entirely untouched by the battle. The exact moment the defensive ammunition runs dry and the wooden gate is shattered, the preserved cavalry is deployed. They instantly apply overwhelming kinetic force to a completely exhausted target. The aftermath of the breach was entirely binary: total execution to broadcast terror to neighboring regions, or the absorption of any remaining useful survivors into the next Kharash. Thermodynamic pressure through weaponized refugees, imported engineering via captured experts, and ammunition depletion utilizing human shields. The Mongol war machine viewed nothing as an obstacle. To them, the enemy's population, their environment, and their technology were merely raw materials, waiting to be harvested in a flawlessly optimized system of destruction.